Good morning, everyone. I am making lavender sachet Valentine cards today. As you can see, the ones that I have on my table are in lots of different colors, and that's because you can really use these for lots of different occasions. They can be used for anniversary cards and birthday cards, wedding congratulations, and if you did them in pastels, you could even use them for baby cards. So, let's get started. This is the one we're going to be working on today. And I started with a pre-printed card blank like this. I have a PDF that I will link in the comments below this post so that you can print your own without having to draw the hearts. I cut each sheet into 2 cards. So I start with something that looks like this. And the first step is to score the card so that it will fold cleanly once you're finished making it. And to score the card, I mark the halfway across point, which is 4 1/4 inches, top and bottom, and then use a double-pointed knitting needle to score the line into the paper like this. Now, crafting sites and card making sites and especially paper craft shops will tell you that you need a balloon folder for this, but I'm not a big fan of specialty equipment if I can get away without it. So I just use a double-pointed knitting needle. The back of a butter knife will also work. When you fold the card, it makes a nice clean line like this. Okay, so once you've scored the card, unfold it again and cut along the line that demarks the heart on the front of the card. You will end up with something that looks like this. Once you've got the heart cut out of the front of your card, save the middle heart piece that you cut out because you're going to need it later. And take a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch sheet of colored cardstock, whatever color you want, and lay it underneath your card, lining up the edges like that, and trace around the heart with a pencil. Cut along the line you've traced. I use an X-Acto knife for this, but you know those box knives that you use when you're cutting tape from packing? Those work too. When you're done, you will have your cut main card, your cut card front, and the cutout white heart that you saved from the card, which you're going to use now to mark your cloth. I am using a scrap piece from a failed project, and you don't need a lot of fabric for this, so using scraps is a really good way to stretch what you already have. And, you know, it's kinder to the environment not to waste stuff. Mine has a different print on either side, but of course that's not necessary either. If you're short on pattern fabric, you can always do a pattern front and just a plain white back, or, you know, whatever scraps you have in hand. So you take your little stencil and place it on the fabric, and then you trace around it. Now, I use one of these for tracing around my fabric. This pen has ink that interacts with the air and fades over a few minutes, so you can mark your fabric all you want and know that the marks are going to just disappear. It's a really useful tool. I find myself using it a lot when I'm sewing and also in other crafts too. So, trace around your heart. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you do want this shape because that's the line you're going to sew along once you've cut the fabric out. Now, I cut my fabric with pinking shears, but again, you know, whatever you have works. Your cut piece will end up looking something like this because you want to leave a margin around the heart of about 1/2 inch of uncut fabric. And this is where you're going to glue the fabric to the card. So it's really important to have that extra edge. But as you can see, the cut doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to do the little dip at the top of the heart because all this extra stuff is going to be inside between the two pieces of paper and no one's going to see it anyway. So you take your heart and you sew along the line you drew, and you leave a little space at one edge. Now, it's kind of hard to see the line on this one, and that's because it's already faded in the air, and that's fine, because you know what? I can stitch this little opening shut later without the guidance of a line. So you've got your heart with the little opening on one side, and you open it up and insert a funnel into that little opening. Now, I have really shaky hands, so you're going to have to forgive me if this is a little bit difficult to see. But what you do is you pour a little bit of lavender, not a lot, you don't need a ton, into your funnel. About that much is good. And lavender is kind of a shape that doesn't want to go through a funnel without a little bit of help. So I use my double-ended knitting needle to help push the lavender into the sachet. And you just keep poking and poking and poking until the sachet is as full as you want it to be. And when it's about halfway full, you stop, because you don't want to overfill the sachet, because overfilling it makes it harder to sew shut. So, you know, keep doing this until about half of the sachet is full with lavender. Not very exciting to watch, I know, but there you go. And when it's halfway full, you pull the funnel out and try to get the rest of the lavender back in the bag without spilling it. And you take your heart and you sew along that opening to fasten it shut. And you end up with something that looks like this. So now you're ready to put your card together. You've got your sachet and you've got your cut pieces. So you bring them all together on your workspace and you glue them. Now, I've tried lots of different glues for this project, and I've got to say that glue gun glue, hot glue, ends up drying too thick and it leaves ridges, which I don't love, and glue sticks are not strong enough to hold it. So what I have ended up using in the end, and what works best for me, is a mixture of white glue mixed half and half with water. So I take some of that and I apply it with a brush along the edges of the cutout. And, you know, be pretty liberal with it. You'll notice that I have a piece of paper on my workspace, and that's because I'm a very messy painter, and so rather than get the glue all over my table, it's easier just to use the brown paper and say goodbye to it later. Newsprint will, of course, work as well. So, once you got the glue on there, you take your heart and put it on there and flip the card over so you can see where you're placing it within the cutout lines, and just kind of press it in place. You'll notice that because the heart is full, it's kind of shrunk a bit, and you can see some of the sewing on the back, and you know what, that's okay. So now you want to apply more glue, and again, you need to be generous with it. You brush it liberally onto the fabric, onto the top of the fabric like this. And also all over the rest of the card. Well, not the rest of the card, but the rest of the front half of the card. Making sure to paint right to the edges so that there are no gaps when you put your paper on. And then you press your top sheet in place. I just realized that I did this upside down. You guys are looking at this all upside down, and I do apologize. But, you know, I'll turn it around in a second and you can see. Okay, now, when you glue the sachet, you're going to have some distortion because, well, you know, you got the thickness of the fabric, you got the lavender. So if you end up with some white edges along the sides of the card like you see here, you just trim them off with an X-Acto knife after the glue has dried. I find that this actually sets pretty quickly. It'll hold in place after just a few minutes, and so it does. It's not like you have to wait a long time to trim it. And I also find that although you may see the edges of the fabric when you're in relief, when you're pushing the two pieces of paper together, once the glue dries, that will be far less visible. So you end up with that, which, when the glue dries and it's all trimmed, looks like this. Pretty easy, right? I hope you have fun with this. It's a delightful project, and people are always pleased to receive these cards. I've never given one that someone hasn't been happy to receive.